So, have you always wanted to hear about the whole story behind Vitruvian Faces, the first album by Fallout Nick Fan? Let's get into it. Hello, hey, what's up, Wonders? Meet your boy Fallout Nick Fan, and welcome back to episode of the Gaming Group. And today we're going to talk about the story of Fallout Nick Fan's Vitruvian Faces, the first album that I released from. So, if you guys know what Vitruvian Faces is, it's the first album that I released. It tells a story of the Renaissance era. Basically, the album I made, which was using cosplay by cutting out two Vault Boy faces and gluing them on. The first right here I took is the Vitruvian Man I drew. Basically, this one says mean Vitruvian Faces. So this right here talks about the Vitruvius by drawing it and applying the Vault Boy on it. And if you guys know what the angry means about the evil dark side of what's happening. And on top, the pyramid right here. The pyramid has the Vault Boy being knocked out. That's a symbol to hidden conspiracy theories of the dollar bill sign. Also, before we do that, let's go ahead and there's a thing that's description down below. We're gonna talk about the pyramid first. So, as you can see, the pyramid right here. The pyramid is basically symbolized to the Illuminati's pyramid. And why? The Illuminati's pyramid is a symbolization to the one on the dollar bill sign. This is a hidden symbol to the meaning on the $1 bill sign. Basically, the $1 bill sign basically has a secret symbol. So if you look closely at the dollar bill sign, this is what the pyramid looks like. This has many hidden symbols. It reads Annua Coeptis, which is a symbol for undertakings. And on the bottom, this reads Novus Ordo Seclorum, which is New Order of the New Ages. So, if you're having trouble understanding what it means, I can put it in the Google Translate. Basically, we're gonna switch it to Latin language. Here we go. So if I put an Annua Coeptis, it spells undertakings. But if I put in Novus Ordo Seclorum, it says the new order of the ages. Now, why? Well, basically, if you don't know what that means, go back to on the dollar bill sign. If you zoom in, there's a hidden secret in Roman numerals, MDCCLXXVY. That's an abbreviation for 1776. That's when the dollar bill sign was invented. So, like, the whole symbols behind the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill sign to the one on the album cover. This is a reference to time traveling. This talks about a person who built a time machine and goes back in time to learn more about the history of the hidden symbols behind the Vitruvius and the pyramid. And mostly, this talks about the believing of God. So let's get into more investigation. Okay. So we all know what that means. Let's go ahead and go to YouTube. Now, we're going to go ahead and look up the Vitruvian Faces. Vitruvian Faces. The first album song I released is Ols. Sorry. Ols. There we go. There we go. Okay. So this story talks about the human life of shapes. So as you can see right here, here's the lyric system. Basically, right here it spells something. This is a great drawing of a quadrilateral from the beginning of the pentagram. Vials of contaminated blood cells. Vessels pump up towards the circuit of the nerve system. Get the best codominant in the laboratory. So this first lyrics talks about the story of of a scientist discovering this is basically testing out a person, a human being, by using one of the blood cells that are contaminated into a vial with acid. He basically ejects it into the human, and what basically does is that the human is basically has a smart ethnic. He basically grabs a chalkboard and draws shapes on it to understand math. He basically draws these four shapes: a square, a rectangle, a rhombus, and a parallelogram. So, right here, it reads the next one: 9085 below the surface. Show me the methods of your algorithm. Be polite. Ask me for your geometric advice. So it talks about him going back to school, to college. Ask the 9085 below the surface, meaning that there are over 99,085 shapes underneath a surface. Show me the methods of your algorithm, meaning showing him the perspective unique on its shapes definition. Be polite. Ask me for your geometric advice, meaning that means talking about geometry. So, what this talks about? It talks about geometry. Here's the next one: eulogies. Help me. I'm not going to read the other one. The algebraic analysis of fractional data. Vitruvian sides of the face of symmetry. Build it towards the veins and bridge them. Geek stimulates my mouth and eyes. Every night this happens. So this other one talks about a hidden symbol behind eulogy. So if you guys know what eulogy is, I'm going to put that in. Eulogy was basically a Greek. So basically, eulogy is basically a god. And so basically, it's basically a Greek. So eulogy is a speech or peace writing that praises someone who's something highly, typically someone who just died. So basically, for example, like this eulogy came from the Greek god of Euclid, who basically came up with eulogy. Euclid was basically known for something. Euclid was also known for the mythology and the founder of geometry. Him and Ptolemy were friends, which they accept friendships between Greek mathematicians and Greek astrology. There are some books that he wrote, which talks about the optical sites. Now, this one right here, Papyrus Oxyrhynchus 29, it talks about the book of elements of Euclid, Greek, and how he wrote this in 723 BC. But anyways, that's what you need to talk about. So we already know what the first one means. The algebraic analysis of the fractional data talks about how the analysis of writing down algebraic expressions such as x equals 2 talks about the data. Vitruvian sides of the face of symmetry talks about how the lines that you connect by drawing the circle around about Vitruvius, which is the abbreviation of anatomy. Build it towards the veins and birch them, meaning drawing the arms and legs by adding no features of the veins. Geeks stimulate my mouth and eyes, meaning that putting in by drawing the eyes and the mouth. Every night this happens, meaning the person who basically was in the laboratory was basically drawing these Vitruvian people and hanging them under his wall to get more info of what Vitruvius is always about. Ain't that a little weird? Okay, here are these ones. Friction spreads the pandemic. Believe in the theory of UFOs. Be rested. Communicate any commitments. Okay, this one's going to be a little tricky one, but I can help out. Friction spreads the pandemic. Basically meaning that the person who's basically building a technology that will help him through his anxiety of Vitruvius drawings. Meaning he's spraying a whole pandemic around people's. Basically, this whole place took place into Verona, Italy. That's basically where Leonardo Da Vinci grew up in. He grew up in Italy. Believe in the theory of UFOs. Basically, back in the 1500s, people have actually believed in UFOs. So basically, he built a time machine to go back in time to when he discovered a UFO. be rested, communicate to any commitments, meaning he basically couldn't talk to the dead about the whole story. Built from geometry towards the fingers, variety of sacred assortments of biography. Come close, write the expression on the board. So this other one also takes place into a fictitious science lab. So back in this laboratory, which is known for, the laboratory scientist's name, his name is Dr. Lee Oswald Haven Farquharson. That is the scientist's name. So what it means for the first one, basically what it means by built from geometry towards the fingers, meaning he's building shapes, like using the puzzles to build a shape. Variety of sacred assortments of biography. So what it means is basically mean that there's been a ton of famous people, famous presidents who know about shapes. Come close, write the expression on the board, meaning that at the end he writes the expression by injecting him with the vial again, and basically telling him to write down an expression. He wrote down this. He wrote down a parabola, and he wrote down under it x equals square. He basically then also draws something. He draw a little message which he went by using a magnifying glass, saying, "The math of Euclid explains geometric devices." So meaning that he was actually the one who's behind the Euclid theory. Most people have been getting weird constraints about Euclid, but this is the end of Ols. That is a little weird of Ols. Okay, the next one is called squared. Basically, go ahead and put that in. Okay. There we go. Okay. So in this one squared, this basically talks about the opinion on drawing many squares. So here it is. Mind these shapes drawn front to back of this white paper of various factors. So this talks about the same person again from the Ols music video. This basically talks about the same guy who was basically tested into a laboratory. Basically into his dreams, he wants to become a professor of mathematics. So he basically mind these shapes mind them mean not draw them. Drawn front to back meaning draw on the same side of this white paper, meaning drawing on the same side of the paper. Of various factors, meaning drawing the factor tree. So he's drawing a factor tree that he drew, and basically he basically also this was actually he wrote, Duvernay, my eyes bleed back to the nerve cells. Remember that one of us ain't being responsible for the accurate sacrifice. Okay. So Duvernay, if you guys know what Duvernay is, I can actually put up the definition. Happy birthday to you. So, Duvernay is an abbreviation in French meaning topographic name, which few preposition and definite article do. For someone who lived near a copse of alders, French vernet, a derivative of use of vernet alder, the Latin collective suffix idem. So this is a reference on the coin e pluribus num, who is the Latin inventor of the coin. But that's not it. If I... sorry. Let's go about to Google Translate again. So like I said, if you put in this, if I put in E pluribus unum, hang on, let me spell this again. E pluribus unum. Okay. So if I type in pluribus num, it's basically out of many, one. That's what e pluribus num is. Meaning out of many, like out of how many coins, or how much in total. Anyways, so that's what it means. Definitely, my eyes bleed back to nerve cells, meaning that he has a symptom, meaning that he bleeds from the nose and the eyes. Remember that one of us ain't being responsible for this accurate sacrifice. He also talks about when he invites a couple of friends over to his house, and quickly pulls out a Ouija board, and by contacting a sacred sacrifice, which his name is basically what the accurate sacrifice wants. Is he wants him to keep drawing the Vitruvian methods. So here this next one. Built-in circuits of the squared frame and red wires to penetrate this motionless white screen. From there to here you are enumerated. So the first one basically meaning that he basically wants to create he wants them to create a giant robot who wants to create more mathematicians. He also watches the famous TV show The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. Talks about a boy who's basically intelligent enough to create these inventions such as these gadgets and robots. He names the robot Goddard, Jimmy's robotic dog. From here to here you're enumerated, meaning that he's in trouble because of the robot's malfunction. So what's definitely enumerated? Mention a number of things one by one. So the robot basically was the one who established all the numbers to compete into him from his anxiety issues of drawing the Vitruvian methods. So here's this next one. Opinion polls has a Democratic majority. Fingers crossed to the borderline. Working out my back door. Cyanide formation of a drug test. Next day, he actually got a job applying to become a professor at his house. Basically, so opinion polls that with the Democratic majority, meaning that he's having trouble with the history of methods by a number of Democrats who tested for doing the math on their own. Fingers crossed to the borderline, meaning he was crossing his fingers to hope he gets what he needs. Lurking out my back door, meaning that someone was actually spying on him and stalking him. And cyanide formation of a drug test basically means that he left the drug, a dangerous drug called cyanide, which is a drug that basically is a suicide pill for him. So he wants to kill him with the cyanide capsule. So this song talks about the methods of suicide. So the same thing is what I say again. Now here's the last one. This one is one of the craziest ones you have to pay attention to, or you'll just have nightmares. Square it off by two separate pieces of Legos. Shave the skin off the craziest schlack. Polish them with lingering nosebleeds. Wait, what are you doing with mind telekinesis? Okay, so did you hear what I said? So what I mean by this is because squared off by two separate pieces of Legos. He basically takes two bricks of Legos and he's putting them together to make a form of a rectangle. Shaves the skin off the crazy schlack. Basically, he basically shades off most of his skin, and and what the schlack is that of the back of his joints. Happy birthday to you. So this is what schlack means. So basically, what basically mean by shellac actually means shellac, which is a wood polishing. Basically mean polish them with lingering nosebleeds. Basically meaning he's polishing them with his own blood, and what does it mean? For the last one, he he basically sits on the floor, gather a bunch of candles, and basically and draws a pentagram by using his own blood, and basically telling the summon a demon to give him mind controlling telekinesis. This is the one from Carrie, which talks about a girl who gets picked on has mind powers. So this one talks about mind powering. That one right there is so secretly. The next one is called Unpolluted. Basically, Unpolluted talks about being. Basically, Unpolluted talks about prison problems. So here it is. The first one talks about it's great being a quadrilateral, meaning that it's basically meaning that the first one he basically gets sent to prison after he summons a demon into his house. It's great being a quadrilateral, basically meaning that he take a drug, and basically wakes up into a prison that is different to the equilateral. Basically meaning that he's in a cube and has nowhere to go. Hooligans tough it up, basically meaning that a couple of demons are fighting him inside of him. Fire for breaking the cup, meaning that he broke a cup and basically was possessed. Nothing else but the face had disease. Basically, he suffered from a condition of a disease. Getting up for the next big squeeze, meaning that he's basically getting up, that he's been controlling with two separate parts of him pulling their strings. I've been unpolluted by the devil himself, meaning that he's been controlled. I've been unpolluted, we chanted the gift of spell. Meaning that he basically found, underneath his bed, he found a book that talks about some old words of the crucifixion. Alright, and the next one, a guard comes into his room, telling him to get up and go with the other prison guards to go see the SCP. This is the one based off the game SCP-173. So basically, this talks about them trying to look at the SCP-173 without blinking. If you blink, he'll move and kill you. 3 strikes on the chalkboard, defeated under pressure from the nerve cells, meaning that the guard gave him a chalkboard by giving him 3 strikes. By defeated under the pressure, meaning that he's under pressure from his nerve cells. Reincarnated divisional powers between the edema and the brain cells. The brain bells, actually, meaning that his powers are basically weakened due to the fact that he's been controlled by a demon. That means that my tongue is dried out, meaning that meaning that every demon took all of his saliva and basically transferred it into blood, and nothing to talk about, meaning that he has nothing to say but the guard and ask him to go to the SCP containments. Sleeping statues turning left that brings the world to the end, which is basically the reference to the SCP-173. I'll show you. In the main part, it talks about him trying to escape the cube. Right here is where the cell is. And these are the people who are trapped inside of the cube, which is a containment system. So basically that's the statue right there. So basically, what it means is the sleeping statue basically means that he's standing still, not doing nothing. But this is a weird game challenge. One of the person must go up to this person, and they have to do a staring contest. Whether the person blinks, if the person blinks, then the statue will move. It will turn its head, meaning it'll be a warning, not to blink again. If he blinks for the second time, he's gone. But if he blinks for a third time, it'll be behind him and it'll kill him. So the person must escape this creature in order to survive this contest. So that's a weird theory. See? Rhetoric's unashamed, the sky turns gray, and the metal arms turn bent. That's the difference, meaning that the tables have turned, and it's up to the person who's basically trapped in the cell, and the whole cube must escape. And the same thing again. And the rest talks about him by taking the book that's under his prison bed, and by reading a spell to fight off this monster. The music video, one of the weirdest ones ever. Must escape. That's another weird one. The next song is called Kepler. This one called Kepler, this one talks about something. So basically the song right here talks about the story of Johannes Kepler, the famous German astronomer who was basically known for the laws of planetary. Don't you know the whole economy is anatomy? I mean, basically that's what it means. The first one talks about a lot of creatures who are basically mannequins are standing in front of someone. Don't you know this thing about astronomy? Basically meaning the whole life of astronomy. I just got away from Scientology, which is a religion that people have been suffering. So this person here is basically the same person who escaped from the last music video, and is basically looking at these whole people who are basically mannequins. I may be the right guy to reincarnate astrology. So now the rest of these the whole right here, the whole universe is malfunctioning from I'm going to be like Kepler. The first one talks about the whole universe is rotating. It spins 360 degrees in counterclockwise, meaning he suffered from deja vu when he escaped from the cube. My clockwise depends on the tip of God's finger, meaning whether he's been bad or good. I just better be off reinvented, meaning he wants to be cremated into hell. He wants to be an intelligent man who wants to discover planetarianism, and wants to discover the same thing as Copernicus, Galileo, Da Vinci, and even Kepler. Domestic engraving ease of engineering, meaning that he's been carving people, which are Neanderthals, on these weird walls in a really cave. Bond this colorful sky to hear me out, meaning that a talking sky, which is a rainbow, talks to him. Vitruvian dark side of the Papa fuse, meaning that he blacks out when he sees the Vitruvian Man alive. Eulogy for geeks and simulation of a painful dilemma, meaning that he sees Euclid again and tells him about a dangerous sacred method that he used against holy demons. Hovering around the burning duo at the third quarter moon, he's basically praying to the moon to stop this. Biting the skin to separate the pieces of the puzzle. I mean, he basically bites a chunk of skin off his arm, and separating with a puzzle piece that he found on the floor at his prison bunk bed. Remember that the step you take can be done, meaning every step he takes can solve his own problems. View the post that originate the pieces of the squares, meaning that Euclid, the god, has sent him a puzzle cube that he must solve in order to hear actual code against the demonoid, against the whole demonoid era. And it repeats, I want to be Kepler. Basically, he keeps praying to become a Kepler, not an astronomer. I mean, most Keplers are astronomy, but he just wants to get off the whole explanation of why he ain't the one who has reincarnation. So this basically he basically solves the puzzle right. He basically brings him a pen and a contract to sign him that he will be he will be signed to become a demonoid until he has proven the fact that he will not be stuck. Now for the rest, I didn't make music videos, but I'll try to make music videos here. The next one is called Congruent. No? So congruent. So in this song called Congruent, this talks about him, self in a cube, returning to his house. When he returns to home, he found his house a mess. And there's whispers saying into a mirror saying something, something, something. He goes to the mirror. He basically says this: purified summaries, penetrating the whole mankind to be dealt with. Couple the sides, two quadratics, be congruent, sinister to straight. He's basically either saying something Bloody Mary or the Candy Man. But wrong. It's not Bloody Mary or the Candy Man. He's summoning a demon who is known name as Lucifer, which is one of the deadliest demons of the Latin history. So, basically he's been taking this weird symptom of taking water and taking a couple of burning ashes that belonged to his father and injecting him into his skin, into himself to generate his blood cells to stop. Here, he sees the triangle, 9 deadly corpses in the cellar, the cyber that gives off the leukemia, the precious artwork of satire, non-stop 8 points for 4 squares make a circle, and your congruence work above the Illuminati's eye. Okay. Basically, let's try this. He sees the triangle. He basically sees the triangle that someone drew on the wall with a black permanent marker and blood. 9 deadly corpses in the cellar, which is the demon. The demon had killed 9 innocent people and basically puts them into his cellar, thinking that he killed them. The cyber that gives out the leukemia, meaning that he's suffering from cancer called leukemia, after he injected him with the water and the ash. This precious artwork of satire, meaning he found an old piece of artwork that his dad painted while he was in the asylum. So basically, the reference is basically based off the Vincent van Gogh theory, where he cut off his ear because he had mental problems and wrote a letter to his wife. He basically did and paint, basically meaning that basically he's non-stop 3 points 4 square make a circle, meaning that he draw this non-stop, meaning that he basically non-stop he will continue this weird demarcation. 3 points meaning that he basically draws 3 points of configurements. 4 squares, he draws 4 squares to make a circle, and their congruence work above the Illuminati's eye. So this is a reference onto the album cover. This is a reference right here. The demon had drew this on. He basically draw the eye. He basically drew the pyramid, and what he did was he taped this character and placed it onto the Illuminati's eye, which is the meaning of sinister death. Okay, next one. Annual Coeptus Novus Ordo Seclorum. This is also the other one. means undertakings, the new order of ages. He repeats this 4 times to summon the person, to summon the triangle, which is the two posse symbolization Latin American word. Young man, flat nose, congruent, which basically talks about him sitting down, painting a picture of the Starry Night, like Vincent van Gogh did into the insane asylum. But the Mayans say but the demons tell him to paint the Starry Night, but he ignored his demons and wrote this. He wrote a young man with a flat nose like Pinocchio. He draws a triangle of congruent. He draws the distance between the mouth. Basically, he draws two separate parts of the mouth, where you put a line to it, meaning that he cut through the mouth, and he wrote down congruent. With the scarsus necrosis, which is basically a suffering anxiety disease. Necrosis is death of most of all of the cells in an organ or tissue due to the disease. So he drew the necrosis on him. So after he hurt. So basically, meaning necrosis is basically a weird organ that basically has a strange disease, which is leukemia. Right here. Meaning that the person is suffering from leukemia. And doing the work of Pythagoras, congruent. Basically, he's doing the work of Pythagorean theorem on the wall. This tenory man bring the knife in, basically meaning that he basically wants a person to bring the knife in, stopping the wounds open before the cord fades away. Meaning he cuts his arms open, and he cauterizes it with a candle. And basically he tells the demon to get the leukemia out of him, or he will certainly die. And he basically fades away to no. By writing that onto the wall, no was his final words before he was basically then sent back to a different place. Okay, the next one is called hypotenuse. So, in the song Hypotenuse. Dangerous dilemma, breaking the stones of Vitruvius, pack me in no plastic wrap around my balls. So this talks about him traveling to France for his next mission. Dangerous dilemma, meaning that he walks around the whole streets of Paris to get answers on what's happening. Breaking the stones of Vitruvius, meaning that he goes and takes a sculpture class by sculpting a sculpture of Vitruvius. Pack me in no plastic wrap, meaning that once that he wraps himself in plastic wrap before he finished the sculpture around my balls, meaning that he not what you think it is. Not what you're talking about. Basically meaning around my balls, basically around the Vitruvius statue. Okay. Yelling the name of the heights of France means he's yelling the demon's name Lucifer to tell him to stop this. The Eiffel Tower tilts towards my right, meaning that the demon had took the Eiffel Tower and tilted towards where he was about to kill him by my vendetta. Meaning that the demon took him to the same house that he had in Italy. Pulled me from this box of hell, meaning pulling him into the box of sins. Do what I tell you, you cockbrain. Basically, Lucifer is telling him what to tell him to do, or he will receive a brutal punishment. Poor choice of words, meaning you don't have no other choice. Now, the choice of words that Lucifer gave him are either work for the vendetta people, or suffer it into the box of plague. And basically, he tells him to piss into a brown bottle, basically meaning to give off urine samples. Real perpetual, this concrete sledge of cold skin, meaning he was knocked out and was basically put into a weird basement that had no insulation, just really cold. Bleeding pain, suffering from the bubonic plague, meaning that the whole place was basically, before he saw, the whole wall was basically painted in blood. Suffering from the bubonic plague, meaning that he was suffering from the leukemia he got after he injected him with the water and in his father's ashes. So optimistic, planking 2 vertebrates, meaning it's so cold, basically planking onto the floor by taking both his arms out and to create a circle, which is basically meaning he's creating a pentagram. Slap me now. Basically wants the demon to slap him shit on this plate, meaning he basically craps on this plate and by eating it. That's like so weird. Triton used the foreign rites, which basically means that he's summoning a Triton to basically compromise his foreign rites. Persuade my sins, meaning that he forgive his sins and let him go. Now, begging him, raise me a Swiss, meaning that raise him as a Swiss, and correct my tributes, meaning to fade away into a picture. So the whole story talks about this person, but I'm not gonna tell you yet. Wait till the end, and I'll tell you. So, anyways, I'll tell you at the end of the whole story explained. So now, the next song is called Phonarox. So, in a song called Phonarox, this talks about him hiring an Indian sacred holy person to help him to get Lucifer out of his sight. He sees trying to spread this Vitruvian plague, describes the sober story of me. Means he sees Vitruvian again, he sees Vitruvius again on the wall. He described the sober story of me, basically by drinking a bottle of wine. He would the Indian, basically known as the Indian Man, would explain to him. Videotape that opioid drug, spread my name down a well, persuading the foreign papers. Basically, the Indian Man wants to videotape the person of him taking an opioid drug, and wants him to go down into a dark well to spread his name, and to persuade the foreign papers, meaning to sign a contract of him staying in a well for over 400 days. Horus sees the eye on the triangle, which is another Egyptian god of the name of Sirius. My pledge to disgrace that brought cold and ice that fought to my disease that endangered my species. Meaning of his leukemia, which he calls it the plague, and basically wants to fight his disease after he had mental problems. 2 sides on my face, meaning that he draws a line from the forehead to the chin. Broken nose is cut off, meaning he cuts his own nose off. Please burn my species by the pentagram, meaning they want to burn his body by the pentagram. But he survived. But when that happened, he survived this burning because he's the holy man. Life doesn't burn itself, meaning that he's alive, meaning he's immortal. Praise the blood of psychosis, meaning that he basically found that his blood changes, drains the curse of twaddle, which is basically meaning that the blood drains into a curse, which is Lucifer. Bring my moments to the statue of Paraphilus. which means the Paraphilus is basically another Egyptian god, another Greek god who basically was the holy man to suffer from the blood. And still not breaking my milestone, meaning not to bribe for my reward. So basically that one talks about him. Basically that talks about him suffering, getting his blood away from him, and not dying from the leukemia. Okay, the next song we'll talk about is Da Vinci. So, in the song Da Vinci, this talks about him going back in time and to find the real person of Leonardo Da Vinci, which basically says, worth of nothing, Leonardo da Vinci sees him painting the Mona Lisa, and the holy man of the polymath into prophecy. Fine Italian work, looking into sculpturism, raising the knife, disappearances of masculines. Basically, what that means is that he basically goes around Leonardo da Vinci's art studio, criticizing his own work, looking into sculpturism, meaning he wants to sculpt a sculpture of him, raising the knife. By raising his knife, disappearance of the masculine, meaning he takes the knife and thinking that and basically destroying the Vitruvian statue, thinking of murdering him as him. Basically, the statue shakes, which is basically Lucifer, and tries to murder Lucifer to get out of the statue. 1503 AD, Mona Lisa, which is the date that Mona Lisa was painted, the year when Mona Lisa was painted, 1503. Oh Mona Lisa. Trying to test anatomy, which basically Leonardo da Vinci tells him to take a sample of his blood. Fortune-telling stories, basically tells him to sit down and talks about his fortune. Aviation dyslemmia, which talks about the flying machine he invented. The flying machine tested, meaning he takes the flying machine out for a test drive. Waking up now, meaning that he crashed the flying machine into a tree. Then he wakes up, long-stayed telescopes, which he woke up into Galileo's palace. I'm not sure, because 1503 is. I'm not sure if he was born in 1503. Let's look. So basically, Galileo was never mentioned in 1503. He was born in 1564. So he woke up a year later by traveling back in time into 1564, where he sees Galileo arguing with Johannes Kepler into his work. Strongly assurances basically mean that the money that he both made. Polymath the mathematician, which Leonardo da Vinci came with him to stop the time. The turn of Da Vinci means that Da Vinci turns his head to reveal a secret message, which is the dark side of a pentagram. How do we fight? Meaning how do we fight these people of immortal man? Distance between protection. Meaning the two stay away from his holy plague. Knife flies fast, meaning Earth revolts really fast. Dysentery notes, meaning that he suffered from dysentery. Atom by molecule, meaning that he states a molecule by testing it. Mega statues, honestly, mean that the three people, Da Vinci, Galileo, and Kepler, turned into weird, strangely statues. So this one talks about him trying to find the real life Vitruvian statue. The Vitruvian Man moves, which all three statues moves, towards the awakening of 1519, which is the death of Leonardo da Vinci. Nothing to believe, meaning that he thinks the whole thing is a hoax. Jacques is fragile, meaning one of the statues' name is Jacques, how he spreads the plague, meaning how the whole plague of the astral ejection was basically known. Records of Joan of Arc, meaning he basically listens to Joan of Arc music. So that's a little weird, but we can still figure out. The next song, Vitruvian Faces, also known as the album cover. So it's after he escaped from Da Vinci, he returned to his house later. He basically only realized that he lost his face. Faceless, undelightful, square the corners, trace the line, feisty, the manifest. So here, we're gonna break this all apart. Faceless is basically meaning that he lost his face. Undelightful meaning that he is no longer possessed by Lucifer. Square the corners, he takes a piece of paper and folds them into triangles. Trace the lines, meaning he traced the lines over Vitruvian. Feisty, meaning that he gets angry by flipping the table and by breaking a mirror. The manifest, meaning the holy man comes out of the mirror. Hey ya, basically mean hello Lucifer. This is sagacious, meaning that the person who's basically a bionic demon priest that's breaking the sacred of a dybbuk box, basically meaning he gives him a dybbuk box, tell him to open it at your own risk. And what he finds in was basically the pictures of demon, which is basically short for demon in the box. Demons that spread crystal rings of Uranus, meaning that there is 2 crystals, a demon, a pack of salt, a glass vial of salt, and a vial of demon's blood, into Renaissance darkness, meaning that he shuts all the blinds down. He basically closes all the blinds, and to not look out. Stone of the Colossus Genius, meaning that he basically brings a pack of stone in, and basically calls it the Colossus Genius. I'm doing a lot of talking here, but we're gonna try to get this up. Bring me down to the plague of rats, meaning that the whole meaning that the bunch of rats came into his house, starts feeding on him. Wipe the blood off my face, meaning that there is blood onto him. To not summon devotion, he draws an upside down cross on his forehead, which is a symbolization of devotion. Economics that grits my weakness, meaning some hobbies, strength, and any other perception basically grits his own weakness by his muscle cords. Disgrace knowledge, he is basically unaware about his secrets. Spread me towards the faceless, meaning spraying his face against Vitruvian Faces, which is the whole his whole walls is covered in Vitruvian. The needs against Mona Lisa. Basically, he painted the Mona Lisa picture, which has its eyes moving. Here to life, sane to confront, dusty to dusty, possession of the Ouija board, running away from the triangle. So here to life, here to secrets, sane to confront, trying to burn the Mona Lisa picture. Dusty to dusty, which is the ashes, possession of the Ouija board. He pulls out the Ouija board to summon Lucifer, running away from the triangle, which he's running away from the Illuminati's eye. And he writes down Vitruvian Faces 5 times on a separate piece of paper, and by donating it to Lucifer, and by sending him another dybbuk box to tell him not to open until he gets his face back. Okay, the next one is called Pi. So, in the song called Pi, we could see him waking into a hospital after he suffered from a coma. where he basically comes back in the year 2020 again. He wakes into the hospital, find that everyone's not home. His time machine was broken because he was sleepwalking. He whispers, "Pie, pie, pie." He hears a whisper. He follows the whisper. Remember the love that I taped to a note, and remember of the love relationship of the demon that I taped to a note, meaning that someone gave him a love note. I was eternal that the fluids were allotted, meaning that he was hooked up to an IV that had the black fluids of his father's ashes. I was facing towards the prism on the wall, which he saw a weird prism that was basically put into a brick wall. Breaking the mirror, my own reflection. He gets up, sees a mirror, uses his fist to punch the mirror, just to not see his own doppelganger. He feels the burning of the triangle, meaning that he burns a picture of a triangle. Prays, seek the prophecy of the temple, meaning that the hospital was basically meaning that there's a secret room which is a temple. Egyptian pharaohs consist constant math of Ptolemy, which there are a bunch of pharaohs praising against Tutankhamun's grave, and to summon Ptolemy. He writes down pyramids, which is basically those little triangle things that they build to worship the pharaoh. Schism, which is a war happened in Greek, Romans of the legions. The Great Sphinx, which is that weird little thing in Greece, and mythology, which is Greek conspiracy theories, and pi, which is 1.34, which is the math term used in algebra. Okay, we're doing good. Fake the Vitruvian methods, which mean that to fake the whole drawing. Pito Euclid, meaning to face asking the third man of architecture, meaning he was referring to Leonardo Da Vinci, into confiscating him to do architectures instead of painting, sculpturing, or even doing voodoo magic. Trace the lines on the heart of the middle. Meaning he's basically drawing using a line to drawing black marks on his hearts. Alright. X marks the spot. Dystopia for departure. Meaning that he draws an X on the temple wall. To put his hand on it, he basically says dystopia 3 times. Dystopia for departure 3 times. And he basically says the German. The German pharaoh says this. Which here's the German version. He says this. Ich entdenken das heilige Methode von Mathematik von Pi. Seine dipsches Worte erhält das Dreieck Geist von Sirius von Menschheit. Gefühl das Schicksal von ägyptisches Pharaon. Ich lerne meine Beruhen durch das Pendel das durch the Vern von eins durch Ende hat. I can't believe I just spoke German. But here's the English version to translate that. I discovered the sacred methods of mathematics of Pi. His Egyptian words tell the triangle spirit of Sirius, eye of mankind. Feel the fate of Egyptian pharaohs. I learned my touch by the pendulum of the German numerals of 1 to 100. So the whole time he was just counting 1 to 100, asking the triangle to leave him alone. But the pendulum was once he touched the pendulum stops at the middle, telling him that there is no need to be afraid of demons. So, that is like weird. Okay, the next song is called Most High Kubrick. Okay, this one talks about him escaping the hospital and going into another weird house that's been abandoned and burnt. Bring down the eyes, meaning that his eyes were also disappeared in the Vitruvian Faces. That complicated my blindness, meaning that the Sandman took his eyes away. Through a piece of glass, meaning to cut where his eyes go. Paranoid peeling the skin, meaning he drew 2 X's on his eyes, and to peel his skin one by one, and feeding it to a bird. Leaking down my pants, which is the blood leaking down his pants. Masquerade, he finds a mask and puts onto his face. Step on the floor, which means he was stepping on the glass on the floor that has a glass piece shatter on it. Cubism painting, meaning he paints these weird. He paints this prism cube. Once that, he goes down to a weird cellar to find these weird symbols. Blood on the walls, meaning someone was murdered. Skipping where the glass parts faded. Facing backwards, he's turning his head. Unrealistic trauma, meaning that the demon returned to give him a brutal raping trauma. Drinking corn syrup, he forced him to drink corn syrup. Dropping wood, meaning that he goes out and chop wood. And incinerate a meltdown, meaning he burns down his cubism painting. The portraits of nudity, he wants to paint people who are basically naked. Breeding worms, words crawl out of his skin. Sledgehammering walls, breaking down the walls with a weird looking sledgehammer. Fire projectile, meaning that he's firing a piece of a firewood. And the draw cubes, meaning that he draws these weird cubes with a weird italic pen. Make me sleep, meaning to pass them out with the injection again. Clean the blood off the walls. Produce the juice, produce his own injection again. Scream out the name Lucifer 4 times. Destiny Price, the Most High Cubic, meaning that the drawing of the cubes, basically he wants to build an own home out of the cubes. Draw the timeline to the polio cure today, meaning that he's also suffering from leukemia and polio, a condition where the legs and arms are basically weakened. Lucifer gave him crutches, but to walk around with after his muscles constraints, after he suffered from a mild stroke. And he wants him to draw a timeline throughout his diseases. I fight tonight, meaning he survived one night. Temper Scouts, meaning a couple of scout leaders come to kidnap him. 31 cannibals, meaning that they're going to eat him alive. Harry Hannibal, which is basically the leader of the cannibal group. Speaking it now, speaking the chant, forge the message. Halloween night, which is the day that Halloween came after. Scraping the bone, scraping one of the cannibals' bones. Sleeping on glass, forcing them to sleep on glass as a part of their ritual. Hollow plastic mannequins. Most of them, he basically grabbing the mannequins and placing them all over him. My whole sleuth, me his whole life. As a sniper strikes, meaning one of them holds a sniper rifle and they blow his head off. But basically, this talks about him living in a cube that he made, and these cannibals come and to take him away, and they use a sniper rifle to blow his head off. That's weird. But the next one called Blanched. The next one, Blanched. Basically, the Blanched. This one talks about. This also talks about another one. We wave our hands to the eye of the Illuminati. Basically, the cannibals are also part of the Illuminati cult. They basically wave their hands around the Illuminati's eye. The eye is blanched with wood, copper, and a magical substance of the agreement's division of monarchy, meaning they're going to start a war between the whole triangle ethology. bring the Egyptian enigma to the pyramid, we chant. Meaning that they bring the old Egyptian puzzle cube, and to chant the Egyptian spell. Now here's the Greek version. This one is a little short one. I don't speak Greek, but I'll try my best. Akume tan kaireo mas tan epchichikon theo this aegis anthroposis. Basically, here's also the Greek writing. I try my best with the Greek writing, but like I said, oops. I'll repeat this again, alright? Akume tan kaireo mas tan epchichikon theoi this aegis anthropotis, which is the English version to "We hear our Lord the Egyptian gods of the holy mankind." So these cannibals were actually burned, and their torture was basically being raped to death due to the crimes of them eating other people. So the Romans raped these cannibals, and they forced the Egyptians forced them to burn them, and they came back. They blow the guy's head off, and basically they place the body by burning them by wearing these weird masks. But the next song I think is called. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna think right here real quick. I found lines. The next one is called "Lines with Mouths." This one's also another weird one. So lines and mouth. This one's a little short one. Before the lines, we scratch the faces. So basically, after the whole worshipping of the Illuminati's eye, they drew another Vitruvian drawing, but they scratched the face of it by using their own hands. The grudge, if sinister, to the Greek trace. So the grudge is a weird Japanese creature. To the Greek trace, which is basically being that the Greek drawings that they wrote onto the wall. The lines of mouth, a taste of sage, mean that they are forced to eat the sage in order to worship. The lines of mouth filled the hole in gauge. So they took knives, rusty old knives, and they cut the guy's head off, the guy's mouth that they blow their head off with, by cutting the mouth off into cutting lines onto their faces. Okay, the next one is called Prism. So in a song called Prism, the song called Prism, this talks about all the cannibals going into the guy's prism, and they're basically trapped in there. The wall of confusion. This is basically meaning that the whole walls are covered in prism shape. Quick fragile lays, meaning that they basically placed glass on the floor. D in my burden, basically it's actually meaning die my burden. 287, blood on my face, trapped in a million dimensions, free me, the reflective prism of ancient verbs, evil devours. So Lucifer returns to get revenge on these people that killed him. With more fates, the plaque the force that taught me sacrifice, brave men that spread my religion towards the synagogue, meaning that they basically go to a synagogue. No, actually, Lucifer goes to a synagogue because Lucifer is basically a Latin. It's also Jewish, because synagogue is basically a Jewish temple. So this talks about the whole spreading of Judaism, the eye of our great saints, which is Jesus. Jesus' eye, to the end that remorse would Satan once and for all, basically to summon Satan from the ground to kill off these people. that taught me sacrifice to fear, meaning not to fear and scare the people who are basically bad. Relationships to handle, meaning that they both have a love spread together. Crying and feeding the stone, meaning that the Vitruvian Faces stone was crying, and the stone was feeding it off on its own. But Satan told him to break the holy box. My prism will shatter on the floor. The inside of the box was another demon. Was another demon, a vial of demon blood, salt, a pack of a weird note that says, to the holy man that once said to me, I engraved in myself into Greek mythology, and a glass prism. He breaks the prism, which basically summons Satan to come. New attentions brought my foot to the corridor, meaning that he stepped into the synagogue, drinking from a chalice, meaning that the priests of Vatican City, basically, this took place in Vatican City, where a bunch of priests forced him to drink from a chalice, resting my spirit on the Mormon stone of busy, meaning that the spirit of all of the cannibals on the Mormon stone of busy, meaning that the Mormons don't take kindly respect to these people. Awesome. Okay, the next song is called Parallelogram. So Parallelogram talks about this. Parallelogram talks about this. Feature figurine of a watching man, which is basically a mannequin that's been colored into black, of a watching man. The plague doctors examine the bones, which a bunch of plague doctors come in and to step on the face, to step on the cannibals' faces.
Hey, Sam.
Hey, Kay, be quiet. Hey, Catherine. Shape in the parallelogram, square of the faces mean the parallelogram was in the shape of from a square to a parallelogram. They put it onto the Vitruvian statue. Ryan is candleback, the truth, meaning they take out these. They took out frankincense, gold, and myrrh, which the three wise men brought. The face of the king with the break of the glass, which is the king of evil, breaks the glass with a spear. Today on the parallelogram, the riot of angels, meaning that there's a herald of angels to gather around the parallelogram. On the parallelogram, I'm in circuits. On a parallelogram into the feather of dusk, meaning a dusk into ashes. And the last one, Parabola. This one talks about these people being stuck into a parabola. Wake up to the coma, which is basically the guy was basically all along was in a coma. He was in the original hospital again. Smelled the whole aroma, meaning that the whole room was basically cleansed into sage. Having hard times to die, meaning that he can never die after his coma. Realism that never dies, meaning that the whole place was actually real, not fake. Being curriculum in this inoculum, meaning he was actually into a substance. Into a small substance, into a maze. Trapped into the hell's box of columns, which is the example of its ejection. My legion corrects the divine side, meaning a couple of the Romans are basically correcting him onto his divisional sign. Division knows my fated paradigm. Basically, meaning that the whole life of figurines, basically or never been mentioned. Tell me now before I die, war horse, meaning which is a reference to a Trojan horse, and he basically tells himself he's in a parabola. Because I'm in a parabola, the only Rex. So basically the whole time he's basically suffering into thinking he was in a parabola the whole time. Faking the riddles of this puzzle box, which is the Euclid puzzle, Greek puzzle box. Conspiracy in this crack house paradox, meaning that the hospital is actually a humanoid crack house. My facial hair is lost in rice, meaning that the person offered him white rice, and his facial hairs went into the rice. Bleeding on the glass of paradise, meaning that he was suffered from many nosebleeds and mouth bleeds, and by spinning it onto a piece of glass. Double my spirit towards the chemical of radium, which caused him to bleed, because he took an injection of radium, and wants him to double the spirit. Running around the whole stadium, meaning around the whole hospital, down a hole through the pipes, where he goes, and he needle hearts of fruit ripes, which are bruised blackened fruits. Because you're facing my danger, meaning that he's basically trying to pass, step into this pentagram to my doppelganger, which is his evil twin Tushin. And it repeats it again. Tell me now before I die. Because I'm in a parabola, he's still in a parabola. And it repeats it again. This improvements numb my fingers, meaning that his fingers were numb after he drank radium, saying, "I'll be riding from heaven to hell," meaning all along he was not literally into a substance. So, woo. So there. Basically the whole album explains. This explains. So the whole album of Vitruvian Faces explains about a demon controlling this man after he found out that his mathematic terms were basically false. So he tries to basically this weird man. It's actually called the Weird Man. The Weird Man, which is the main protagonist, is the Weird Man. And basically the Weird Man was basically all along was trying to escape his reality with demons, incubus, succubus, etc. Basically meaning that he was basically trapped into a weird inoculum theory that brought him into a legion. Basically meaning that he brought the whole legion into his own grave. So basically, it talks about. So the whole thing basically always talks about. This whole thing talks about throughout the whole evolution. This talks about him bringing suffering him to his own death. So, I'm sorry. I'm gonna say this again. Basically, so we're gonna go through this again. If you hear about Ols, it talks about him being tested into a laboratory. Square talks about the whole time. It talks about him being into different realms.
Hi Nick, how are you?
Hi Kate. I'm talking about Tool. Whew. So the whole album talks about him being tortured to death, being tortured to rape to death, being blooded to death, and boom.
What a fat slob.
So there.
Alright, well, listen out.
That's the end of the inoculum theory.